hide behind the shocks and say, but the costs, my costs of production have gone up, my capital expenditure has gone up, and therefore I'm going to pass on this price increase to consumers. But that is precisely the role of the authority. We cannot change the status quo of the macroeconomic environment, but we can influence how it finally, or how it ultimately affects the final consumer.
Thank you.
You are looking to me.
Thank you very much. Indeed, just to give a summary of Ms. Dada's comment is that in a market where we have rising interest rates, we tend to have problems in the markets. And one such is that as interest rate increases, then it becomes expensive for firms to produce. And as such, we might have a case where firms swallow each other in the form of measures and acquisitions, and then which leads us to monopolistic kind of situations in the market, while at the same time, when we have exchange rate issues, firms are more likely to take advantage of that and go into what we call, the pricing or, yes, anti-competitive issues. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll take this I will give Medada to just add one little thing and then to get to, yes, please.
Yes, I thought I'd just, thank you, sir. Yes, indeed. I thought I'd just add that I'm sure people will be interested in knowing what some of those practical actions are from the Competition Authority. One of the practical actions is to understand a firm's behavior, right? And ideally, this behavior should be understood pre, during, and post an economic shock. And the best way to go about understanding a firm's behavior is to conduct constant market monitoring. We need to understand who these firms are. We need to understand how they price so that as and when the shock happens, we're able to trail the trend in pricing to see whether or not it could be reflective of the costs. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Medada. Reshapat, the governor has mentioned something that I think is very interesting. The governor has said something that is very interesting in the form of the rainbow, and that the rainbow is not forever. And it can be an opportunity. More similar like the sunset. It doesn't take forever, just take 5 seconds and it's gone. When we look at this stream, it suggests that Botswana may be at a turning point rather than simply experiencing a temporary economic slowdown. From the banking sector perspective, what makes this period different, and how should policymakers and financial institutions adapt?
All right. Thank you so much, Doc. Good morning, everybody, and all protocol observed. I just want to appreciate, Governor, for you giving us a second opportunity as the Bankers Association to be part of this panel. I note that of all the people that were there last year, we remained. So thank you very much for that. And long may that continue, Governor. I also am representing today the Bankers Association of Botswana. So I wear a very different hat today, and I do acknowledge the other chief executives of the other financial institutions here with me today. I'll do my best and not embarrass you with my own comments, but feel free. In terms of the way I'd like to address this question, I'd like to address it in 3 parts. I'd like to address it from the first part by speaking about that rainbow, I've got a few thoughts around that rainbow. And then I'd like to tackle it from our responsibility from a Bankers Association of Botswana as a fraternity of banks, how we support into the monetary policy and also the activation of the fiscal policy and the requests and the demands out of the, say, the budget speech. And then I also do want to talk to the policy side of things. So I'll just tackle it in three parts and try to not take too much time. I think quite a lot of us would never remember, and I certainly don't, but let us just visualize that rainbow from the perspective of what happened in 1966 or maybe 1965, from a perspective of the challenges that perhaps a 20-year-old at that time faced, and perhaps the parent of that 20-year-old faced, and how difficult it must have been to visualize a better future. 12 kilometers of roads, now almost 8,000 kilometers of tarred roads. Very little availability of clean water to the taps. Certainly very minimal availability of electricity in certain towns and villages. It must have been very difficult. But if you talk about it from an imprint of a DNA, you can just imagine how imprinted a DNA of resilience at the moment in the culture, in the people, that should be the one that is driving each and every one of us at the moment. And that simply comes from saying, been through difficult moments before, overcome those difficult moments. That was in 1966. There were many others, 2008, 2015, if some of you remember. And some of you perhaps remember more recently how we navigated COVID. So there certainly is a lot within the DNA to just help us to catapult from sort of where we are. So that rainbow, Governor, I think it really should be about execution discipline, because I believe we've got what it takes. Moving on from there, I mean, there's so many UCT alumni, Graduate School of Business, there's many Harvard, INSEAD. We've got what it takes. I think it's just within us to do it. The piece I really want to start from, Doc, is just saying that this certainly is not a cyclical slowdown. It is definitely a structural reset. And how we go about this has to be from a perspective of how do we use capital smarter? How do we allocate that capital to accretive products and generative activity? And from a Bankers Association of Botswana, and later on, I hope, Governor, I can also address the conversation about, the space in which we've been provided as financial institutions to support and maybe some of our misgivings. And tackle it from saying, we see more projects lately from a Bankers Association of Botswana being more ROI, ROE driven. So even though things could be tough, the suppliers, the producers, the entities on the ground are actually looking at revenue generative opportunities and are actually finding them. So even though we may be in a structural reset, that capital is being used a lot smarter, and you're finding more institutions and entities really reflecting on, is this value for money? Should we be doing this, or could we be doing something else with that scarce capital that is actually there? So I think that is definitely a shift, and how we need to operate in a disciplined way, because those good old days, I think in reality, they are gone, and we must be thinking about a new future and how we get there. From a policy perspective, I think policymakers, from my perspective, should be focused on building trust infrastructures. Trust infrastructures help to create an environment where businesses can thrive and the economy can prosper. Some of those trust infrastructures are so simple. It is how we work on things like our borders, how we assist in terms of VAT, how we work on issues relating to BERS, how we work on work permits and things like that. That creates an environment where businesses can thrive, ease of doing business, and I think that priority should actually be there. From a bank's perspective, we do two things. We help to catalyze but we also help to stabilize. So from that dual role, quite a lot of what we're going to have to be doing is zoning into the areas where the economic growth will come from. Imagine if all of our MSMEs, micro, small, and medium enterprises, were supported to the nature in which they require to be supported. Currently, only 1.3 billion from the budget was allocated to the sector, but it actually needs much more than that, closer to about 40 billion to be catalyzed. So that is another area where we need to be helping to catalyze as well as stabilize, and certainly the monetary policy channel that we've been provided by the Bank of Botswana needs to be helped to support the government stimulus and things like that. So I think for me, this is a complete reset. We have what it takes. There is certainly a lot within the policy mandate to help us to build confidence over protectionism, and certainly from a bank perspective, the role that we play is to catalyze and to stabilize, and that's really where we need to play. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Tumi Mbakany, she's the Chief Executive Officer, Business Botswana. From a business and private sector perspective, how are current developments in interest rates, exchange rates, and liquidity conditions affecting business investment decisions, operating costs, and expansion plans?
Thank you, moderator. Before I respond, I would also like to appreciate the governor, but for a different reason from Shepherds, for calling out the banks and cautioning them to do right, to not take advantage of the situation, to really do right in terms of interest rates. Because at the end of the day, even though they are our members, as the Bankers Association is a member of Business Botswana, the clients of the banks are the private sector. So we rely on, and we hope that the private sector really does right. I would like to start by appreciating the transparency that this type of session brings. It gives us the details behind the monetary policy, because as the private sector, we're just doing business, we're creating jobs. So it's critical that we convene like these. And we believe the Bank of Botswana is on the right track. This is the second engagement also this year. I know we had one also in Francistown where they engaged the private sector. So in terms of interest rates, it's obvious that the cost of capital has gone up because of this whole changes. We understand that banks are also in business, they need to survive. But once the cost of capital goes up, that means your costs of production, capital-intensive projects are delayed. Private sector focuses on survival and liquidity, collation, versus, your proper aggressive growth, which is what currently the country needs, growth. So we need industries that are able to grow and create jobs. So for clients that have variable debt, with the banks, this affects them hugely. And then in terms of the exchange rate, we appreciate the notion behind that, the fact that we want to make our exporters competitive. We want to protect, to also rebuild in terms of our reserves, to also make the foreign earnings of these exporters to be good and pula value. But the big question, and maybe the big elephant in the room, is, do we have exporters? Where are those exporters? So if we have this great principal policy, who does it really benefit? It will benefit just a small portion of the Botswana, especially the Botswana private sector. So what we would like to see as Business Botswana, it's parallel. So we have, yes, fiscal policies that support, but also structural reforms that are in parallel. So we first need to focus on building the local industry. We need to ensure that we have an industry that creates jobs, and also an industry that is owned by locals, because then that also it also affects the repatriation of profits, because the more businesses you build that are in country, it means there's limited, there's a lot of cash flow that remains, within circulation. So In our opinion, would like that, in parallel, we appreciate that this is also linked, Governor, to the Economic Transformation Program, which we believe in. We believe that it could actually, if done right, it has the potential to really transform this economy. So lastly, in terms of also investments, so investments, people want predictability when it comes, to investments. You want the regular dialogue like, this one, which we are happy, that is happening. But what should happen more, and we hope that we'll be able to bring that back, it's a public-private dialogue. We used to have what is called the High-Level Consultative Council, which ensured that outcomes, policy outcomes, were able to be tracked, and this could be linked to what the Economic Transformation Program is about. And we really do push for that, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, from a media perspective, how does business and economic journalism help ordinary citizens understand decisions taken by the central bank, and what can policymakers do to communicate economic issues?
How does business and economic journalism help ordinary citizens understand decisions taken by the central bank? And what can policymakers do to communicate economic issues more clearly to the public?
Thank you, Doc. Good morning and good morning to the House. That's a tough question because we are used to asking questions and not getting questions. So, yeah, but let me try and address it by give you a scenario of when I was a young boy in Ngamiland, and it was just towards the last years of when the Christian missionaries were coming to Africa and our country. And I remember they used some evenings, they would come in our village, and they would have this big screen, a big screen like this one. In Mau, we called it film. So at that film, at that evening, before they could show this film of Jesus Christ, they would preach the Christian the Christian faith. So because largely it was old women and young boys like me who didn't know English at the time, they needed a translator to whether they're speaking in English or Latin, because a lot of them were coming from Europe and America. So they needed a translator to actually pass the message on whatever they were preaching on. So that translator had to pass the message as it is to the locals. And I want to believe that's the role that financial journalist or any other journalist should be playing in this field or in the economy. When the central bank make decisions, the governor would go up there and use certain language. In fact, we have to appreciate that. I think it was during the tenure Dineker when now the bank started using the vernacular to the local language to also translate the MPC decisions. But before that, it used to be a struggle for those who could be watching. And we appreciate that. But other than that, we had, as a nation, had to rely on journalists to actually do the translation in terms of the jargon that was being used at the central bank. So the journalists or financial journalists come in the sense that, one, we are a nation that from our basic education curriculum, we don't have business or finance or economics as a core subject. There are few people who went to public school and studied whether it's accounting or economics or finance. So that limited them because some of them went as far as becoming greatest lawyers, best medical doctors. But if you walk to them and tell them that a telco, a state-owned telco, is listing at the stock exchange, and you throw in a way and say dividend, they would not know what a dividend is. So, so that's the challenge. That's the background that we have. So we now have to work around that to say we have a cohort or a generation that is well educated, but not as much in the issue of finance. And I'm saying this because it's quite important, because we're at a point where the government is trying to mobilize resources domestically and internationally. We know that at the budget speech, the minister did mention that they would put in parliament a proposal to revise the ceiling of the debt to GDP ratio. And that is done to mobilize resources, or to mobilize financial resources for government. Now imagine this situation, Doc, where the government, through Remo Tlale, the city mayor, walks up to the stock exchange and say, I'm listing a bond because I want to build a maternal clinic in Buntle. And someone who's working doesn't know what a bond is and doesn't know the importance of that, but they are potentially a beneficiary of the project that Remo Tlaling would do. So imagine if he was to do that, and we don't know how to act, and maybe I'm about to buy a grey import, and if I'm well versed in the issues of finance, I could take a decision and say, perhaps I should go and buy this bond that Ray Motlaling is trying to list and mobilize the resources. Because at the end of the day, if Ray Motlaling successfully lists that bond, build that clinic, I might be okay. I don't have anyone expecting, but if my girlfriend is expecting, there could be the next beneficiary of that project, just by the decision of me having done that. So that's the role that journalists need to play in terms of just simplifying the language and helping the citizen to help the government to help them.
Thank you, Revictor. So, Mayor Dlada, you gave us a background relating to issues on consumer and competition perspective. Please take us through what you believe could, make firm struggle at this particular time where we have economic growth under pressure, government finances being constrained. How does this affect businesses and households?
Thank you once again, Doc. Well, I think the most obvious effect on businesses and consumers is that their ability to source financing, whether at the household level or at the business level, will be greatly constrained. If you are an SMME, seeking credit during this time would be difficult. And this essentially means that if you're looking to expand your business, if you're looking to grow, it will be an impossibility. And at the household level, borrowing will be constrained. You can't get a loan. So basically, your life is at a standstill. So that's the simple answer to that, sir. But I know there's a second part. Should I go ahead and?
Yes, please, go ahead.
Yes. So given these dynamics, these shifting dynamics that we would ordinarily observe when there's a liquidity crunch, what then, again, is our role as the CCA? I think one of the biggest things that we need to be sensitive to is agility. We need to be agile. We cannot sleep on things happening around us, because the moment you close your eyes, you open them and the market is completely messed up. So investigations are very important. Market studies are very important. Just understanding the behavior of firms and being able to categorize them as per the Competition Act. There's a lot that happens in businesses. There are a lot of friendships that are forged, and some of these friendships are not necessarily genuine, right? There's something known as coordinated effects. It's one of the most difficult contraventions or behaviors to pin down, where firms can collude tacitly. Tacit collusion is the most difficult because there is no written agreement that says on such and such a date we're going to increase the price. But with a trained eye, right, with a trained eye, you can observe certain movements in pricing, quality, innovation, and be able to categorize this conduct. Importantly for consumers, it's vital that there be transparency. Businesses have to be transparent about how they charge, their contracts, they need to be transparent in that. But of vital importance is whether these contracts can actually be understood by a layperson. Do not overwhelm consumers with difficult contracts, and yet you are tying them down to take certain decisions that impact their finances. So our role is to educate and raise awareness to consumers, and ultimately have an empowered consumer who, when looking at a contract, will say, I don't agree with these terms, and question the terms until they get to a point where they're comfortable with the terms. I want to close the response to this question by saying, I think what can save us as we interface with different regulators, especially in this case, the Bank of Botswana, is early detection, right? Because we are on the ground, we conduct these market studies, we monitor prices, we are able to pick price irregularities to a point where we can even be instructive to the Bank of Botswana and say, listen, this is what we found. In fact, we do have an MOU with the BOB. So I believe this facilitates a good partnership between the CCA and the Bank of Botswana. So we can sit early on and say, this is what we are observing in the market, so that when they take certain decisions, certain policy decisions, they have this information at the back of their minds. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. My esteemed panelists, please also note that you are also free to put a word on questions that were raised to your colleagues. And this is a well-known fact that for a very long time, Botswana has been depending on the diamonds. And for that matter, it has been diamond remained one of the largest foreign exchange earners of the country. And since the diamond markets started having challenges, it means that we are not exporting and we are not getting enough foreign exchange. So given the pressure on foreign exchange reserves, and then also fiscal tightening and weak growth, how should monetary policy balance the need to control inflation while still supporting economic activity and lending? This question I directed to Mr. Shepherd.
All right. Thank you again, moderator. I would like to touch on two topics. I think previous speakers also raised that. I'd like to start with the one of the interest rates. Managing a bank or managing any financial institution certainly is a very complex piece of work. And I would like to offer that we do not only look at the interest rate as the only variable that needs to be managed in the context of how the financial institution works. Last year, there were two fundamental shifts. The first shift was the increases in the bond and maybe BOPSI uptake which obviously crowded out the commercial banking fraternity to some extent. You just need to look at the data from the beginning of the year all the way up to the end of the year to actually see that there was some significant growth. Whilst that was happening, I think we also saw some significant decline in terms of the economic activity coming from the various sources of liquidity, whether it is the diamond sales and others. Now, the bank participating in the monetary policy and assisting the fiscal and generating the government support has to manage things like capital adequacy, have to manage things like your liquid asset ratios, have to manage issues like your broader loan to deposit ratios, concentration of portfolios, and capital and liquidity management. Whilst doing all of that, you then get to a point where it's important to realize that risk-adjusted returns, and I spoke earlier on about ROI or ROE, then become crucial in terms of how the sustainability of those institutions is actually managed. So I think that's some of the necessary anecdotal points that would have obviously been affecting an asset and liability committee, a risk committee, or a CEO and his executive during the course of 2020. And certainly all the way up to now. So it's not easy, and when you think about risk-adjusted returns, you also need to look at the data. Credit extension last year did grow, even though not as much as 2024. I think you can look at that data. It is available, and you'll also see that in certain pockets of the market, like basically retail deposits, those deposits actually grew. So it's a mixed bag, of issues. And I think the reality then comes to the piece of saying, and I think the governor spoke about it, to say, we have the monetary policy rates and we've got the bank prime lending rates all needing to be working in unity in order to make sure that the sustainability of the financial services is adhered to. And we get that, and I think that is certainly being observed. But I do not think that it would be appropriate to only look at the interest rate part. If you look at the growth in MSME lending last year from various institutions, it grew quite significantly. If you look at products like purchase order financing last year, grew significantly. And if you certainly look at other pockets within corporate lending, grew very, very significantly. So I do not believe that this issue is here to stay, but I do believe that it is being managed somewhat. I want to speak then secondly to financial literacy. It is not only about early childhood or tertiary, even at this level. I think the conversations that are happening, which are very good ones, the Botswana Stock Exchange assisting to say, okay, how do we get more retail bonds into the market? How do we move Botswana on the street from thinking about financing for cattle or for beef and moving them into other instruments that are probably listed or unlisted and trying to diversify portfolios. It really is a very important component of what we do and what we want to do better, from the Bankers Association at all levels of the economy to institute, greater knowledge and wisdom around how do you invest, how do you save, how do you grow wealth, what should you be doing at this point in time, looking at the difficulties that are sort of there in the market. But your question was really around the harmonization of the monetary policy to ensure that there's balance whilst managing interest rates, exchange rates, and so forth. And I think to that piece, I'd just like to say that a monetary policy cannot remain static. It has to be adaptive, and not to create stress within the system means that each and every one of those has to be adjusted, regularly depending on the data and the information that is available. So far, so good. I think if you look at 2025, quite a lot of different shifts were being made, whether it's on interest rate, on exchange rate, and all of those, as was mentioned earlier on, are starting to deliver the intended results. So I think that is a necessary adjustment where we're not static, but cognizant that we need equilibrium. Thank you.
Thank you, Rashapat. Still on the same issue, can you please take us through how do business view these changes, and what would help maintain investor confidence and competitiveness under a situation where Botswana is currently managing pressures on foreign exchange reserves and exchange rate adjustments?
Thank you, sir. So the business community understands the importance of some of these changes that have happened. I think the important thing is really the timing and then just rolling it out. So we believe we need efficient and responsive investment support institutions. So earlier on, when we're talking of, say, the high cost of capital and so forth. So if this is export focused, so what it means then is the importers, because we're still a naturally importing country, are importing at a higher cost. So we need funding institutions that are aware of that take cognizance of the fact that we still import raw materials, we still import machinery. We don't do that here. So we need, and I know I've had this discussion with banks, and this is mainly on the bank side. So we need more cash flow focused assessment of those who need funding, where you look at the potential, instead of, say, the historical. So when we say responsive, it doesn't necessarily mean that someone who has not had a contract for the past 5 years, they should be able to qualify for funding if they are onto a good project, right? So most of our banks still look at a 5-year historical financials, and that we believe is not that responsive. They need to look at the potential. In addition, we don't have enough credit guarantee instruments in this country. I've seen the American ambassador, I've seen the World Bank representative, I've also seen someone from the EU, because I know they have big, like around credit guarantee schemes, tools, including European Investment Bank and so forth. So my suggestion is that government really partners for the benefit of the private sector, because it is only governments that can venture into these agreements on behalf of the commercial banks. Because as I said earlier, the commercial banks are our members and we know they need to make profit. But if because then what that would mean, it would mean that viable projects where maybe the owners don't have security and so forth are able to benefit from that. And I do know that there's a lot of interest in that. There's the Africa Credit Guarantee Fund, which I know has shown interest in Botswana. Then the other one is linked to what Victor said also. We need greater availability and education around this hedging of instruments and so forth, because sometimes it's like a foreign or Greek, right? So I think it's very important so that when people make, whatever investment, because we are in this room, yes, we'll ensure that it trickles down, but what about the rest of private sector? We also need, which we are happy about from the budget speech, we need continued fiscal discipline and responsible expenditure management, because we can do all we want. We can generate all the income we want. If we are not going to be prudent in how we spend public, because Botswana is a peculiar case where private sector is still not driving. So that the largest procuring entities are government. So if government doesn't spend right, it affects all of us. So we have nothing to buy, or to supply. And lastly, we need measurable reforms, with milestones. We need, I think someone also mentioned this, we have this BTEP and stuff. So let's ensure that what we set out to do, we also gonna. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Just 1 minute. Yeah.
Sometimes when you're in sessions like this, as a bank, you do feel quite a lot of pressure, because it all comes across, like it is the bank, only the banks can actually solve this problem. But I don't think it's like that. Debt to GDP was mentioned. That's a catalyst. It can really help us to go somewhere. There may be some unintended consequences, but look around us. SA, I think, is at 80% debt to GDP. The US is probably at 120 or 150% debt to GDP. Namibia, I think, is at 75. So, as long as we deploy that capital into accretive production, I think we can get somewhere. The second part, corporate credit, retail credit, MSME credit extension, NPLs are increasing. So the risk-adjusted return now then gets to project evaluation, business case management, a lot of the financial inclusion elements to help, and financial literacy to assist and to help, because not every project is going to be viable in the day and age. So we just have to understand that and work with that and go for the things that will work. What's happening right now is the focus that we need to bring into how we do things is so crucial, and I think it's so necessary. So I just wanted to maybe add that in support, but I think without a doubt, the economic equilibrium around how do we get employment growing, I think for me, that's where the crucial part is. So as long as we continue to support agriculture and we continue to support other areas that actually give us the economic employment growth, I think we'll be on the right direction.
Thank you very much. Ray Victor. Indeed, the economy is at a period of uncertainty. In this period, people often worry about issues relating to inflation pressures, interest rates, and the exchange rates. In your view, please, can you elaborate on how the central bank can communicate this development in a way that the public, that it builds or improves public confidence, while still being honest about challenges and the trade-offs between these challenges?
Okay, I think all the hard questions are coming my way. So yeah, I think it goes back to the issue I mentioned earlier on financial literacy. That is the starting point, really. But one also have to appreciate the fact that, like I said earlier on, Repelelo, when he was governor, the central bank started reading the MPC statement in Botswana, because the reason why I keep on mentioning the MPC statement is because it's directly linked to the money. It's the decision that the bank make here, the central bank make here, that ultimately has a bearing in terms of a consumer who is about to walk into a bank to get a loan. So one, the use of the language over the years, of just one language over the years, was a drawback. Now we appreciate that we are able to get the statement even in Botswana. But we could also, the bank could also now move further and be able to say, after a meeting like this, and or an MPC, we know MPC is meeting, and tomorrow they would issue a statement. After a meeting like tomorrow, the bank could reach out to the media and be able to simplify what exactly they mean in terms of certain decisions that are being made. And then the other one is also just being upfront in terms of the decisions that are being made. For example, when the bank changes the crawling rate or our monetary policy regime, there's always a lot of questions coming from Botswana. Some of us who are pseudo analysts and street analysts would actually go to even label it and say this is devaluation, and others would say no, it's not devaluation. So that shows you the gap that is there in terms of financial literacy. So when a decision like that is being made, there is need to consistently explain what it means to Botswana, first in their language, but also in terms of what the thinking behind the decision is. For example, if the decision is made to protect the foreign reserve, to say maybe the amount of cash that we have in foreign reserve has fallen, and we think if we don't take this monetary decision, we will get into trouble as a nation, the bank should freely explain that to the nation. That helps the nation to also understand, to say we are not taking the decision to make life harder for you, but we are actually saying suffer just now so that in the future you are able to succeed. So that's one strategy. Also to extensively explain the trade-offs, because there will always, in the financial services, there will always be trade-offs. It goes back to the decision that the example I gave earlier on the issue of luxury versus production, where a Botswana can decide to say, I'm going to buy a grey import, or I'm going to go to Mogodisani and buy a car, or I can take that money, take it to Remo Tlaleng at Gaborone City Council, because he's listing a bond and he wants to build a maternal clinic. So it's a trade-off that a consumer has to make at some point.
Thank you very much. Yes, at this juncture, I would like to call upon our esteemed guests. If they have questions to contribute to the discussion, please, we'll take 3 questions from the audience. Thank you. We have
Yeah, thank you very much. You know that as referees, we don't get playtime. So it is at forums such as this one that we... But we are not to be quoted in Parliament. Oral members should be warned to not quote the speaker. Victor, we live in an era of post-truth era, the era of alternative facts, misinformation, disinformation, fake news. How is this playing out in light of the challenges that we face? Because every morning you wake up to an alarming post in the media, especially social media, Facebook, and I'm just wondering what can be done to try and get proper facts to the people. So that's a question. That's the current challenges. They exacerbated that, or how is it playing out? And then on the bank and business Botswana, you've been talking about the need for legislative and policy reforms and meaningful engagement, and you alluded to the HLCC, which is no longer there. And I'm just wondering where do you dialogue and engage with key stakeholders currently? Which platforms, and what really are you recommending? Are you recommending an HLCC as we knew it, or a reformed structure where you can meaningfully engage? And what do you think about the pace of both policy and legislative reform? Because the 13th Parliament, for instance, is for all intents and purposes a transformative parliament that seeks to transform. How is the pace, if you rate it?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let me just say we will take 3 questions and then we'll respond after that. And in the interest of time, may we, after the speaker, others I'm going to ask to keep the questions short so we can have more questions. Thank you so much. Dr. Khanetsano, former Governor Rapelaelo, is there any other hand at the back? Era, after Mr. Pelalo, so we'll be doing 4. Thank you.
Thank you, Director of Ceremonies. I was going to hold back until towards the end, but I got scared when you said only 3. I thought you were going to take only 3, and that was it. So that's why I rushed to raise my hand. But having said that, let me say something that I've said this before, and I want to repeat it again today. And in so doing, just so that I don't mislead the audience, I just Googled the meaning of the word emergency. It says a serious, unexpected, and often dangerous situation requiring immediate action. So I'm on the right track there. I often get surprised when some of us present today's economic situation as an emergency. And I beg to differ. Forward. First, we need to recognize and acknowledge that individually and collectively, we have failed this nation. We have failed to diversify the economy. To the extent that even today, we are an economy that is heavily dependent on diamond-financed government spending. Hence the reason why, when diamonds do not sell, government doesn't spend that much, liquidity in the banking system dries up, interest rates go up. That's the whole thing. Therefore, this is not an emergency. And I agree with you, Shepard, when you said this is more of a structural shift rather than a cyclical one. Structural in the sense that at least ever since I started knowing how to read economics, this is the longest period within which we have gone without selling diamonds proper, since April 2023. So it's structural, therefore requiring structural adjustments. Structural adjustment on its own or on their own are very painful. It's a painful exercise. And if we are to transform this economy, we need to be prepared to take the pain. Implement meaningful and painful structural adjustments. And the pain will be much less if we do it voluntarily rather than wait until somebody comes and impose those on us. And I see us fast moving in that direction because I sense that there are many of us who are failing to adjust to the new reality. For us, it's business as usual. Now, my point is, it's not a question. It's a demand from the central bank. Demand, Governor and the board chair. A demand is a non-negotiable requirement. That from yourselves, what we need is an unbiased and straightforward, objective financial and economic advice from yourselves without any fear or favor. We are going to have to implement those painful adjustments, painful decisions. Bear with me, Ms. Moderator. When you adjusted, and for the right reasons, the trade margins around for the exchange rate, you know, there was a lot of misgivings. Let me put it that way politely. And I had a conversation with one gentleman who happens to be a businessman in Botswana, and he was talking about the devalued pula and how painful that was. I posed the same question to him. That was a time that the pula was trading, one pula equivalent to R1.68. Did you pass the benefit to the consumers of the stronger pula? That's how the conversation ended. We could not go any further. So what I'm saying is that we need to rise above individual business interests and place the country at the forefront. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think in terms of, okay.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be back in the Namahoto auditorium. I hope you can hear me. Mine really first is to, once again, thank the bank because policy credibility, transparency, and public accountability is really important. And I think the sustenance of this fora is really very, very important. So I wish to say thank you, Governor. The second thing is something that I learned again in this area, in this location, is that you never waste a crisis. Never waste a crisis. And I think it's very important that during this time, the
reforms that are required to be undertaken needs to be done. And as the Permanent Secretary has said, clearly with the honesty and integrity. But let me also make the statement that a forward-looking policy posture should not just confirm our reality. You can't argue it must change our reality and impact us, because we need to change our reality and not to reinforce it. Because what we have today is not what we should be having today. And therefore, I think whenever we come up with policy postures, we need to be this. The other thing that I want Governor and everybody is to really to be aware of potential capture by industry, by government, by media, by people that have voice. Remember that monetary policy is for Botswana, not for just businesses, not just for government. Government, we're going to have to be very, very sure. So it's going to be very important. Mr. Moderator, and as you go through this, there is an issue about a trust deficit in our transmission issues. And I think this is where maybe that's what is happening. And I think this whole question about the trust deficit between the industry and the policymakers, I think we're going to have to look at it. And the communication here is really comes through the market rates, the policy rates. For example, we continue to compute our real monetary condition index using policy rates. And the market have given you different rates. And so you're going to have to struggle in the bank to make sure that you are reflecting what obtains in the situation. Because if the bankers, the households, the government, the industry, those people, they don't trust you, you have a problem in terms of injecting the oxygen that is required to run the economy properly. And I think it's very important. I mean, this was shown, if you look at direct lending to government or bond yields and say, here is a risk-free instrument that comes from the market, and look at the prices that the government is dealing with. Finally, let me just call, the problem with your statement, Governor, is that you didn't sufficiently project the risks and risk management, both from the performance of the external sector, but also from the behavior of government. And I think it's very important that we deal with this. I mean, from a point of view that we are having a managed fixed exchange rate regime, and we have the performance of the external sector is extremely poor. Somebody was asking, where are the exporters? Where are we getting the foreign exchange? But we have this exchange rate that everybody wants it to be strong. How? And if we can't have an honest conversation about whether or not a crawling band exchange rate regime is appropriate in the context of diminished foreign exchange reserves, then we are not being honest, and we are not having the right conversation. And finally, as I said, the government behavior also needs to be called. And I'm sitting next to the man on my left here. Is the man who is responsible for fiscal discipline. A rule-based fiscal discipline should be respected, because ultimately we know that taxes are going to have to come to pay. I mean, there's no nation in the world that progresses being a nation of rent-seeking behavior, where we become hunters and gatherers of things and sell them. No, we're going to need to have the tax broaden. But more importantly, therefore, remember that what government gives its citizens, it must first take it from its citizens. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Thank you. Yes. Can we, for 1 second, allow the panelists to respond 1 minute each because we are.
There was a direct question to Business Botswana by the Honorable Speaker, is to say, indeed, we would love to see the HLCC, the High-Level Consultative Council back, but reformed. So we continue to introspect. We want it to be more solutions-based than only problem finding, but we'd also like the 22 sectors that Business Botswana oversees to be the feeder, the pipeline. So in terms of the sector, regular engagements, they should fit into that. So we've already started with the sectoral, with some of the ministries. So we do believe that because it's structured, so it gives, accurate issue, updates on what the issues are. Then in terms of how we are, in the meantime, how we're engaging, so we are fortunate that government continues to engage Business Botswana. I'm sure you've seen recently with the BPC tariffs, BERA did engage us, and we had a position paper on that, which we felt the timing, even though it's needed, the timing is probably not right, because there's all these things, because the consumers are also overburdened with that, but we did a survey within the private sector. We've also engaged with the Bank of Botswana in Francistown, when there was also a discussion around local banks ownership, because we were happy also that as a bank, they are intentional and ready to support that, because as we said earlier, we still don't have that limit on repatriation of profits, so the more we have and stuff. Lastly, can I just do the last one? We have biannual National Business Conference, which the last one we had, which is also co-chaired by government and Business Botswana. It was in 2022, so this year it will be in Francistown again in October. So it gives an opportunity also for public-private dialogue. And even with the same approach, we also intend for it to be more impactful and stuff. Thank you. Moderator, you are rushing me. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm even swallowing my.
Sorry about that. Can I give Victor?
Okay. Thank you, Doc. There was a question from the speaker on misinformation. I want to say that I think in this digital era, it's very difficult to eliminate misinformation or fake news, but we can always beat it. We can outperform it by doing certain things as a nation, and this includes parties on both sides, being the media itself, the consumer of the product, or the consumer of the media, or the information that comes from the media. And this should be done through clarity, through speed, but also through transparency. Some of the information that gets into the mainstream media or the traditional media, and that we later find out that was not factual, is as a result of lack of transparency, largely from government. So I think the more transparent government institutions or any other organization is, the better. Because if I go out and write fake news on you, and you've been transparent, someone who is supposed to consume that fake news would be able to recall what you had said just on your own, or on your independent space. But the most practical one, honestly, is to develop journalists, because as we speak, our newsrooms are skeletal, very skeletal. So it is really impacting on the product, on the final product. Everyone is speaking on how journalists are failing the nation, but no one is speaking on the issue of development, to say how do we develop a new cohort of journalists, particularly in my area of financial journalism, such that when there's an event like this, they are able to go out and explain what exactly went into in this room. So we have to come up with a program. I'm very much appreciative of Steve and his team at FNB. They annually host 2-3 days training of financial journalists, and the Bank of Botswana, Dr. Mosanako, they also do the same here. But in my view, in my humble Ngamiland view, that's not enough. We need consistency, because from experience, what I see is that an invitation would come into a newsroom and say, there's a training from FNB for 2 days, or there's a training from the central bank for 2 days. Whoever is available, even if it's someone who's writing on Vim and Peasy, sorry V, but that person would go for and attend the training, and they're not covering MPC or MPS or the central bank, but the bank had spent resources on training that person. So going forward, I think we have to come up with a comprehensive program that can actually develop a cohort, a good cohort of journalists that can take over in terms of storytelling, because it goes a long way, even in terms of us diversifying the economy.
Thank you. Reshapat, you have 1 minute.
All right, Honorable Speaker, I think the one for dialogue, more dialogue, I think would be appreciated. I think the bilateral dialogues do happen, but as bodies, I think our pinpointed reforms, and I think that can help. In our area, there is a lot of good consultation with the Bank of Botswana, the governor and his team, so that helps, but a lot more would work. I think my last comment really is on what Repililo said. I did mention trust infrastructures as well at the beginning of my chat. I think quite a lot of this has to start with the alignment between the legislature, the government, and other key fraternities. But I think more importantly is just to make sure that we are focused on making our economy, our country, more attractive to others, because we do need some help. And I think as we break that down, we'll be able to get the FDI that we need, and the support from other agencies, that I think Dumi was talking about as well, from the liquidity perspective, from a capital perspective, and also from mentorship and support. So I believe trust infrastructures need to be broken up and make ourselves more vulnerable, more humble, and I think we'll get to the next step. Thank you.
Thank you. The conversation is getting very interesting, but in the interest of time, I'll take two last comments. I'll start at the back and come to the front.
Moderator, let me just do this. I know we're running out of time. Sorry, Mamba, can you foresee to rush you? Let me just request guests, can we add an extra 15 minutes? We were to finish at 11, just to allow the last round of questions. Just bear with us. I know we had said 11, and let's just stick to that, please, so that we don't inconvenience other guests who have other pre-planned arrangements. Remudise, there was another hand. Then Mr. Fahad, my boss, but Erra, please. Erra, thank you so much for understanding. And my colleague from GAPS FM, Yarn FM, yeah. So those are the last four, please, and then we. That will be the last one, and then please bear with us. We are not closing you out, but it's just in the interest of time. So in that order, please, and it will help also to address your questions to specific speakers. Competition Authority, Business Botswana, Bankers Association, Business Botswana, and the media. That will help so that when they respond, they know who's to respond to your question. Thank you. In that order, please, Ramodis.
Okay, thank you. I was gonna hold back my question because of time, but I appreciate the opportunity. Really, I wanted to comment on the discussion between the BAB chair and the president for Business Botswana, Tumi and Shep, and saying, yes, I think what is obvious to the public is interest rates. And also just to share for Bank of Botswana to make a note, we pretty much in the last quarter of the year, we've been receiving directives, and I think they are necessary, some of them. But I think we need to look at the full equation. As banks, it's simple. Shep said, yes, bank is complex, and I agree with him. But for this purpose, let me simplify it. Our role is to help those who need finance. Where we go to the depositors, and we take those deposits, we pass it to those who need finance. As long as we take deposit at 15, 20%, for us to stay in business, we have to make sure that we are able to retain and pay those depositors. So some of the directives, can we direct them to the deposit pricing? Honestly, and can we, between, I'm not sure the NBFIRA is here, what value, why would one ask for 20% on a 3-month deposit? As banks, our hands are tied. For us, we have to pass that cost, unfortunately, for us to stay in business. So that's my ask. Can we sit around the table and say, how do we control this unjustified deposit pricing? We don't want to sit and collude with my...
Thank you, Ramodisa.
We can use the law.
Thank you.
But also the other, Matt Dumi spoke about banks financing, and we appreciate financing based on cash flows. I think maybe it's also a point of trying to get milk from a bull. Commercial banks, there's a certain element of risk that we can take. We are highly regulated. We have to make sure when we go and get a deposit from a client, we return that deposit. So the certainty, level of certainty of that money coming back, we can't gamble on green projects, all green projects. To a certain extent we do, but we need to look at other types of financing. That's what we need to be building in this market, so that commercial banks can do what commercial banks do. Thank you.
Ramodisa, thank you. Russell, yes.
Oh, okay. No, thank you very much. I think my question goes to Ms. Dladla. You spoke about the nexus between price increase and the monetary policy reforms. But don't we have a solution nudge in terms of the legislative and the policy, framework, maybe to introduce what you call an automated, price indexation, looking into the interest rates, the inflation, and also the exchange rate. And my second question, goes to our permanent secretary. I know you are not part of the panel, but the SBT is maturing probably on Monday. The stocks, bonds, and treasury, bill is maturing on Monday, and I should come to Parliament, I think, in 5-10 days. But do we have a proper debt management strategy as a ministry? Because you are the guys who are advising us. We are just there as mere, politicians. We don't have the technical know-how of all these things. But before we pass that, I'm focusing on the SBT section 20, the limitation borrowing, because probably the time has arrived now for us to increase it to 60%. But we have a proper debt management strategy. But the last one, the governor, when you do your policy appraisals, but please try to trial and test all the policies, and also demystify to the public. I'm just writing on that question from Mr. Pelaelo on the issue of the crawling peg. You should be able to make an illustration and demystification to the people on the ground. Why are we using the crawling peg? Why are we not using the rigid regime or the floating or the flexible regime? So when you do all these things and do the experimental testing, you should be able to explain to the people why we have adopted that regime, that type of regime, the crawling peg regime. And just a point of correction, I'm not a minister, I'm just a mayor member of parliament, but I received.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Fahad, policy advisor to government. Okay. Ramutsu.
Thank you, Dr. Msarangwa. I think the three of us, the governor and I think the current peers who are obviously former employees here, I had actually intended not to speak, but because I mean we might be sort of like be accused of appearing to try to rule from the grave. But I think clearly our economy obviously is going through very difficult times, and I think pretty much in the same vein as Dr. Kanatsano was saying, I think first basically is just to congratulate the governor and the team for continuing what I think is an important and credible legacy by Bank of Botswana to, conduct policy in a transparent manner. But I think one important thing, obviously, going out into the private sector, I think I've picked up one or two lessons out there to realize that the bank, obviously, as a unique institution, is pretty much ring-fenced by legislation, and therefore I think pretty much safe in many respects for us to look up to the bank to continue, especially in these very difficult times, to provide objective and unbiased advice to the government, particularly in dealing with the current challenges that we see. I do recall back in our days when the IMF was coming in here, there was always an issue around we have a bloated civil service. It didn't quite sort of make a lot of sense, but now in these difficult times, these are very, very pertinent issues that need to be confronted. And clearly, I think the central bank is better placed, as I say, as a ring-fence and independent institution to continue to advise government in an unbiased and very objective manner as we navigate these very difficult times. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kalamaba, did you still want to go? Okay.
Greetings and blessings, and thank you for catching me fast. I gather my thoughts together. I am here in the path of service. We all must see the greatness of Botswana rise, and rise fast but practically. I am not going to make emotional or sentimental statements, but provide concrete measures. So I am Farzam Kamalabadi, Presidential Envoy on International Relations and Economic Development. I have observed, I'm a guest here. I came here pro bono and will remain so forever. I am a guest here and I observed. I have observed that neither in the, we call it budget speech, nor in our very important and very wise, by the way, wise monetary policy statement, a dimension is missing. And this dimension is missing not only in the statements, but in the entire country's dialogue. Everybody talks about what I call, what you say, diversification, and they say it has been the dialogue for 30 years. But nobody is questioning why it didn't happen, and how it can happen, and how it will happen very fast and easily. My job is to unlock. And here is my short statement. So no one in Botswana is addressing or dialoguing, not even considering one issue: new pockets of revenue generation. What I call early, fast, large, and new pockets of new revenue generation. So allow me a minute. What are the new pockets of practical revenue generation large? FDI is not the only solution. Foreign direct investment and private equity, they take long. They take 2 years to decide to come in, 2 years of gestation to become dividends and proceeds. And the money doesn't go to the hand of the government first. It goes to the initiative and projects. So we need to find a 1 year or 6 months or 9 months large revenue generation. And Botswana has it. You have high rating. Africa is rising. You should become, and we should become, the savings and cash deposit destination of the world. The savings that are silent monies, that move like sand dunes, they will go where the interest is high. And Botswana is the best banking situation that will become offshore banking and also receives within a few months, like Bangladesh in 1 year brought in 36 billion US dollars just by this policy. So we can enact it, and within a year, next year, the budget should not have deficit, we'll have surplus. Only this one initiative. Of course, I know Mr. Governor is at it, and this is not a new concept, but for some people might be. Early monetization, we have talked about it, but we have to act. Now there is a way, $3 trillion money in the digital tokenized world that will want to have now real world assets. So there is a way to do early monetization by large tokenization of dormant assets. All the assets of Botswana, whether it's the agricultural or mining, they can become tokenized and become bankable notes and can be floated and can become cash. Then for the FDI, this is a key initiative. For 20 years, and in fact 5 years, there are 700 to 800, maybe 1,000 companies who said they have money and they are ready to invest, and they were not heeded. They were not invited. They were, in fact, not even rejected. It went into a limbo. So we need a fast approval mechanism for not months, not years, but in weeks and days. At least 200 projects should be approved in one slate.
Sir,
yes.
I do appreciate your interventions, but can you just speak to the ones that relate to the subject matter for today, which is monetary policy, and then just please keep it short. Remember, I had asked for time extension, and
Yes.
we're not doing one.
No, I will keep silent.
Thank you.
Because my job was to awaken that there is a need for the dialogue for solutions.
Noted.
And there are solutions besides. Limited resources and limited resources allocation in a budget is not the solution of unlimited solutions that are available.
Noted.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you. The last one? Yes, ma'am.
I have a question for Mr. Isam. In one of your answers, you compared our GDP, debt to GDP ratio to other economies like the United States, India, and so on. Given our current economic climate, including lower diamond revenues, constrained fiscal conditions, declining credit rating, can our country sustain a higher debt to GDP ratio without jeopardizing fiscal sustainability and long-term growth? And if so, give a latitudinal range and justification. The second question that I have, the government through the BETP has given themselves a 10-year forecast to grow. Is this period enough or sufficient to sustain the higher debt to GDP ratio while achieving fiscal consolidation?
Thank you so much, moderator.
Thank you. Let us do this. So there were questions that were asked to PS and then the governor. Let's start with them and then we'll close from this side. Please be short in your response because of time, please.
Thank you. Even though I feel ambushed because I came here with the intention to ask questions, not to respond. But I'll nevertheless try and respond to the questions. The first question was to do with the bill, the stocks and bonds bill, relating to the adjustment of the ceiling, that to credit to GDP ratio. Whether we have a strong or properly structured debt management strategy. That we do. And we work closely with the central bank as our financial and economic advisors. We work closely with them. We have also sought assistance from our development partners such as the World Bank and the IMF. And that is not to say that there is no room for improvement. There's always room for improvement. And let me preface that by saying that, you know, our success of the past, where we had loads of cash from diamond revenues, led us to ignore certain things that we ought to have done, such as developing capacity in the debt management area. And that is something that we are currently doing, at the same time trying to see how best we can assist government in terms of acquiring the cheapest of the loans that we can possibly do. And in so saying, let me respond to the question that has been posed to Shepard, but Shepard, you're not in no way saying, I'm not saying you should not respond to that, whether the increase in the debt to GDP ratio to the 80% or 90%, is sustainable? Yes or no? Yes, depending on how you utilize the loans. We have the BETP, and this actually also addresses partly what Dr. Kalamabad has said, that we are talking about lack of diversification, but what are we doing? We have come up with the Botswana Economic Transformation Program. In there, we have identified the priority sectors. And when you go to the website, betp.gov.bw, it will take you to the website, and the priority sectors are there. You click on any of the sectors. At the bottom of that page, you'll get the profile of the projects that have been identified under each sector. These are categorized between purely private sector projects that have project owners, PPP projects, and purely public sector projects. So if our borrowing, to a large extent, goes towards those PPP projects that have the capacity to generate or to create jobs and generate returns, we can take our credit to GDP ratio to above where we are today and still survive, because in the next 3 or 4 years, we will begin to realize those returns from the projects. And it's a no if we borrow to consume. And I've always said that, you know, our economy is deceiving to a large extent. When you drive into Gaborone and you are not familiar with the Botswana economy, you think that Botswana economy is booming. Why? Because there will be loads to go down to the production or factory level, then that will be sustainable. Was there another question for me?
Thank you. Thank you.
I think I've summed them up.
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. The Governor, can I give you this time? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Normally, in this forum, the Governor does not ask or take questions. But having said that, let me just respond to one by the Honourable Member. The engagement in our policy framework. Honourable Member, before we announce or we make any policy decision, we have models here with ourselves, even the exchange rate with the Ministry of Finance. We test different scenarios until ultimately we reach a decision. So that decision will be well informed. We don't think there will be any value, or even some people will not even, the majority of people will not even understand our models. I think our job, which we can improve on if we need to, is once we have made a decision, I think it was mentioned by Victor as well, is to go out before the street economists, to go out and announce the decisions that we have made as the central bank and the why. I think that's very important. We'll continue to improve on that. Thank you, Moderator.
Thank you very much. At this juncture, I will give the floor to my panelists. I'll give them 2 minutes. That is to respond and give the last, any discussion, that something that they would want to add to this particular discussion as we close. I'll start from this side with Mandla. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And to respond or to attempt to respond to your question, sir, I think it's a very important consideration that you are making. But one must be very careful not to undermine the institutional independence of the Bank of Botswana. If we are to have a provision within our Act that is specific to certain macroeconomic variables, we are essentially taking away work from the Bank of Botswana, and these are the experts of macroeconomic policies. However, what we are looking at is having a provision within the Act that will deal with excessive pricing. Remember, with all these macroeconomic changes, the remnants or the result is that you will most probably, see an increase in prices. So that is where the role of the authority should be. It's what results from an exchange rate hike, results from an interest rate hike, not particularly the process itself of setting those interest rates. And I think for me, a parting shot is, as we look inwardly for solutions of how we can improve our economy, of how we can improve industrial of our businesses to compete, not just locally, but within the region, effectively compete within the region. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Rashapat, can I respond to?
Yes, I will. I also just wanted to touch on just a comment on mergers and acquisitions. Perhaps it's a good time in our economy for quite a little more of M&A activity, just to get new capitals, and also just to consolidate certain industries. So I look at it with a great deal of interest, and I do believe that there should be opportunities within M&A, and I hope that that's also what you see as my colleague. The question is best served from the PS around debt to GDP. My view, it's sovereign risk, and sovereign risk assessments have to be about, will there be ability to repay? What will the current account look like? What will be the revenue generative opportunities look like? And how do we schedule the debt, short-term, medium-term, long-term debt? And what do our broader sovereign matrix, sort of look like? I use the comparisons of other countries because it's always good to pit yourself around similar size, maybe GDPs, and what economic activity they are producing. And I did like the one around Namibia. It's closest, and it made me feel more comfortable. I've seen how they've been able to also grow their GDP over the last couple of years, and where their debt to GDP ratio actually sort of is. So, we didn't use our sovereign grade really well when we had it. We have it. I think this is a great opportunity to deploy some of it, and like PS mentioned, let us use it wisely for activities that are actually generative and accretive. I think lastly for me on that point is, let us onshore quite a lot of domestic capital. It makes absolutely no sense for us to have such a rich and deep, sort of pool of pensions, which is at JP Morgan and others. And on the same breath, we get an interest rate of those specific custodial services and so forth, which we have and can actually do sort of right here in Botswana. So I think that conversation needs to continue happening, because that's another way of creating an ecosystem of this capital, which is accretive, if we can onshore some of those deposits that we actually have. We did try this in the past. Some of it has come back, but there still is a lot that we can onshore. From a perspective of my parting shots, I think for me it's the rainbow, Governor. It's really about execution discipline. It's about time. We don't have enough of it. Capital has legs. If we don't use the capital that we get wisely, quickly, or attract it, it may go next door. And I think I really like what Repelailo said, don't waste a crisis. Our history is built on how those crises were managed, and the emergence of the new era is really about how we manage this moment and this time. So let's not waste this opportunity. Let's do the best that we can. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sir. Ma'am Boitumelo.
Yeah, thank you. So earlier on, before I was rushed, I wanted to I wanted to touch on the importance of regulatory impact assessments, and also that's part of the engagement response I was giving. So we are currently, and we're happy, and this, like I said, we're happy that government is intentional. So when you read about it, when they said that government wants this to be a private sector driven economy, we feel it, right? We differ. We've differed on the Employment Act, the 44,000 minimum wage, which is ongoing, but there's engagements. We've differed on the security and related services in sourcing, hot potato with us, but the critical thing is it's ongoing. This is what the PS had said. The whole reason why some of us exist is to really give raw the situation as it is. As the private sector, we are ready to partner with government to turn around this economy. It is possible. Indeed, we will not let crisis go to waste. And just to also demonstrate that commitment, we all know that we encountered floods last year. Private sector came together. Business Botswana made sure that, so we are running a fund called a Private Sector Disaster Recovery Fund. Instrumental. So we're saying, besides that private sector is making profits, but we are also for Botswana, and also private sector can. So we are coming in, to support, the issues that have emerged. But lastly, is to encourage, because this is also good. We have an ongoing partnership with the Bank of Botswana, and we've agreed, Governor, remember we agreed in Francistown, that will have enterprise surveys that should form the basis of some of these monetary policies. So we reiterate our commitment towards that, because it's only when you have fully informed information on the ground. It doesn't just relate to you, it relates to also other sectors as well. So we recommit as Business Botswana and the private sector that we will provide you with that data, but let it be for the private sector, because once the private sector is competitive and it thrives, then jobs will be created. Then these worries that we have will not be there anymore. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ray Victor, you want to add anything?
Okay, thank you, Doc. I didn't have any questions, so I guess I'll use my 2 hours to to keep everyone here. Well, my parting shot would be to say we can't create wealth for Botswana without onboarding them. And one way of onboarding them is to push the issue of media literacy. Let's develop a cohort of journalists that could share credible information with Botswana, and also ensure that it's information that they could use to make daily decisions. Because where we are, the government needs to mobilize resources, and there's no how the government is going to mobilize resources and have that process ending as a wealth creation for Botswana if they are not on board. So that's just about it.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, let me take this opportunity to really thank my panelists. They have done a very good job to really discuss this particular topic that we have, and the contributions also from the esteemed guests have been very valuable. And at this juncture, I would call Mayor Masanako to close this session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Remotobi, for facilitating, moderating this session, and to the panelists for your rainbow of insights, and to you, distinguished guests, for your patience and your questions and interventions. I would now invite the board chair of the Bank of Botswana, Ramolusi, to give tokens of appreciation to our panelists. We have come to the end of the session. Just to remind you that the monetary policy statement will be followed by other publications that talks to the same subject of monetary policy. These are published in April, August, and October. So look forward to those also. And also to say that as part of monetary policy tools, the bank also hosts media briefings where the governor announces the policy rate. I think you noticed that today we didn't do that. So tomorrow you can join us on Facebook at 12 noon for the monetary policy decision, the interest rate decision. So with those few remarks, I would like to thank you all, our stakeholders, for embracing our invitation and for being with us today. To our online stakeholders, thank you. And I think we are now free to exit the platform. And we are coming to the end, closing, and asking the governor to lead the distinguished guests for refreshments, and then protocol officers to guide us as we exit the auditorium. There are several exits. There is one at the top, and then there is one here, so feel free to also use the exit at the top of the auditorium. Thank you so much, and have a good day.